What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is a video I've been looking forward to do for quite some time, and that is, I'm worried about the future of films. So this is one that, again, I've been putting off for a while now, largely because a couple months ago, there were a lot of people that all of a sudden were making videos that were similar, and I'm not going to lie, I did listen to those videos just so I heard other point of views from fellow, film critics on YouTube, and it was very interesting. I really found myself learning a lot from other people, but at the same time also kind of confirming certain things that I've already had in my mind in terms of my own opinions. But what really confirmed me saying that, you know what, Chad, you need to finally make this video, was yesterday. But before I mention about yesterday, I will say this. I have written down all the talking points that I'm planning to do, but I will say this, it probably will be all over the place at the same time, so just bear with me, and keep in mind that these are also my personal opinions. Yours may be different, and that is what's great about film as an art form. It is subjective. If you don't hold that belief, that's fine. But at the same time, I am looking forward to hearing your opinion on what do you feel about films right now. So let me know in the comment section down below. But anyways, yesterday, I'm filming this on July 14th of 2024. So yesterday, I turned on my TV and I saw that the Bike Riders is already on streaming. This is a film that came out like 2 weeks ago. And the film Maharaja, which is an Indian cinema film, I saw it like 3 weeks and it is now on Netflix. So the theatrical window has drastically changed to now only being a couple weeks between going from theaters to then streaming. That's insanity. And that's one of the things that I will talk about in this video. But I wanted to wind the clocks back 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I worked at a Sunoco. It was a job that, for its time, I enjoyed it. But one of the things that I especially enjoyed was my coworkers. In particular, a coworker named Grant Passman. Shout out to Grant. He was a coworker that, in many ways, helped shape me to be the film buff, film YouTube critic that I am today. He was someone that had a lot of interesting takes in regards to films, and at the same time he also introduced a lot of films to me, such as like Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson, just in general. And I'll never forget when he said to me one night that if film came out today, such as The Graduate or American Beauty, it would be looked at as an art house film and not a blockbuster success that it was for its time. And that was something that I always kind of agreed with him on. But recently I started thinking about it and I was like, maybe not. I don't necessarily know, because if you look at something like 2014 was a year where you had Birdman, you had Grand Budapest Hotel, you had Boyhood, Whiplash, Foxcatcher. You had a lot of films that were of independent cinema nature that actually did well financially. One could argue largely because they got nominated for Oscars, but The Graduate also had that, and American Beauty most certainly did as well because it won Best Picture. So it's one of those things where it's like, is that still the case? And it got me thinking, are movies worse today? Are movies worse than they were 10 years ago? Are movies worse than they were 5 years ago? And you'll hear many people say on the internet that movies are worse than ever. They have been the worst since the 1950s. You'll hear that a lot, especially on Twitter. Here's the thing. For myself, it might be a hot take. I don't agree with that. I don't think that movies are worse. In fact, my take is this. Every single year in cinema has bad movies. It's just a fact of nature. Every year has generic movies. Every year has good movies. Every year has masterpieces come out. That's just the reality of it. The difference is you're cherry picking. If you go back in time to like something like 1982, it's like, oh, that was such a great year for movies. You had not Back to the Future, you had The Thing, you had Blade Runner, you had E.T., and it's like, yeah, you did, but two of those movies didn't do well financially at the box office, and it took years for both to become classics. And one of them, yes, was a success at its time, but there were also plenty of films in 1982 that weren't good. plenty of 1982 films that were generic and some that were just competent, solid films. And that's fine, but that's the reality of today. The difference is that people aren't in the midst of going through a couple hundred films like many film critics. For myself, I always try to watch at least 100 films from a certain year of today. So, for example, the year's 2024, I've seen 59 films as of the filming of this video from 2024. And I can tell you right now, there are some that I can see being classics in the future. There are also some that I think are just good films. There are some that are very okay, and then some that are genuinely terrible movies. So the fact of the matter is, have movies gotten worse? No. It's just that there are a lot of people that are deciding to cherry pick. And that is something that I think is an issue that I want to discuss as well. And it's something that isn't a black and white issue, but I do want to mention it now. And with mentioning it now, it's time to talk about the decline of physical media. So, yes, I know what many of you are thinking. Physical media, that's pretty much obsolete. And yeah, that's kind of my point now. It is a lot easier, but at the same time, a lot harder to find films. What does that mean? It means this. Streaming is a convenience. Many people love the fact that they can just turn on the power button of their TV and right then and there they have Netflix, they have Paramount Plus. It is very nice for a lot of people. They have a lot of options. But at the same time, in having a lot of options and in also having many classics be on streaming services, it is overwhelming. You have thousands of options, and that is something that for many people, they are not going to want to do after work. They are not going to scroll through thousands of options of, possibly movies that are classics from yesteryears. They are going to want to watch a movie that is getting pushed onto them by whatever streaming service. Many people, and I'm saying this as someone that knows in terms of friends and my own wife, is that many people will just look at the top 10 movies of Netflix for that week. Those aren't saying that those are the top 10 best movies. They are saying that they are the top 10 movies that people are watching, meaning millions and millions of people are watching these. And so I guess that must mean it's good, right? That's another question for another video. But my point is that convenience versus back in the day, I know I'm going to sound like a boomer here. Back in the day when you would go to Blockbuster or you go to your local library, which I still do, you, instead of having thousands of options, you actually have something that's right then and there. You can look at DVDs, you can look at Blu-rays in terms of the front cover, the back cover, how long is it, the rating and everything. Again, hundreds of options versus thousands of options, also being right then and there and being able to make a decision for, a couple movies that you're planning to watch for that week. Right then and there, you have it set in stone. These are the movies I'm going to be watching this week. So then it makes it a lot easier where it's like, oh, what am I going to be watching for this week? Oh, wow, there's a couple movies like on at Blockbuster. I'm going to choose one of those. As opposed to, what am I going to watch? Scroll Netflix. Oh, wow, there's so many movies. What am I supposed to do? And that's what I'm saying also. Streaming services have it be where there are many movies that also get taken off streaming services. So it's like there might be a month where it's like, you know what, I'm going to want to watch this movie, but it's no longer on that streaming service. Then you have to try to find where it is, as opposed to physical media. If you have a local library or back in the day with the Blockbuster, it's there unless someone accidentally borrowed it first or rented it out. So that I think is an issue in itself. But I also think that streaming services working with studios are essentially trying to take out theaters. And I know some people are like, oh, I've had bad theater experiences. And that's fair. I've had that too. But here's the thing. If you take out theaters and you are just putting movies on streaming 100%, or you're making the window so small in terms of theater to streaming, you are having it be where you're kicking out theaters and then to the point of now where you're making it feel less special. And not only are you making it feel less special and less impactful, you're also making it very isolating. You are making it so that way when people are watching movies, instead of 100% having to pay attention with everyone else in the theater, you are probably inclined to either, if you have, a pet in the house, petting an animal while you're watching a movie, so then you're not paying attention to what's happening on screen, being on your phone, scrolling on TikTok for hours on end, sending text to someone while watching a movie, and then putting the phone away and saying, wait a minute, what's going on? I don't understand. This is the movie's fault. And it's like, it's not the movie's fault. It is the fact that you as the consumer aren't paying 100% attention, as opposed to in theaters, you are supposed to be paying 100% attention because you're not supposed to have your phone out. You're not supposed to have pets in the theater, unless, of course, there's certain circumstances. But I'm saying this. That is the reality of it. Kicking out theaters is something that I'm not happy about. I'm really not. I see the writing on the wall, which is why I've been going to the theater even more than usual. I'm not happy about that. You take that out, you take physical media out, you take theaters out, and you are just having streaming. You are making it so that way people are more accepting of not as good quality because the compression rate is a lot worse than as opposed to physical media. And on top of that, you are also teaching people to not really pay attention to something that thousands of people worked on. And so that's what I'm also saying. It is a very, very frustrating time to be going into that industry for many people for that reason alone. There's also another thing that I want to talk about, and that is, yes, that's right, media literacy and social media. I think the first thing I'll talk about is media literacy. People being on their phones constantly, people not paying attention to the film, but then also having so many questions and then immediately saying that something's a plot hole instead of trying to put two and two in their head, is for me, them not understanding film as an art form. There are many cases where you will see a character do something, and the next thing you know, they will have a ticket in their hand, and then they'll be on a plane, and it's like, some people might be like, well, wait a minute, how'd they get on the plane? And it's like, well, if you're paying attention, they had a ticket in their hand, which implies to us as audience members that they were about to go on a plane. There are instances like that where people just aren't really understanding of that. And again, that's visual storytelling. So there are a lot of films now that are trying to heavily focus on dialogue heavy storytelling. So that way, when people are actually on their phones, they can hear it whilst at the same time be writing something out on their phone, as opposed to film as an art form being visually heavy. And so that's why you'll see a lot of films that are on streaming that aren't that. That's just my personal take. Another thing is that social media. I know I'm going to sound like a boomer when I'm saying this, but I really do feel as though social media has greatly impacted film as an art form. And I'm saying this as someone that has social media. You can see in my section, I have TikTok, I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have all of those. But here's the thing. Having all of those makes every single person a critic. And by that, I mean you will see a lot of people use buzzwords. Greatest movie ever. Worst movie ever. Oh, this movie, it was so woke. Oh my goodness, this movie was so right-wing. Oh my goodness, this movie is a left-wing wet dream. You have two different extremes. And you also are having people use these clickbaity words to try to garner reactions, so then that way people will then try to check out the movie. I just saw a film called Longlegs, and I didn't see any trailers, didn't see any marketing for it. I just knew who it starred, Nicolas Cage and Jamaica Monroe, as well as who the director was. So I saw the film. I thought it was pretty good. I liked it, but at the same time, a lot of my friends I've heard say that it wasn't as good, that it didn't live up to the hype, that it's not the scariest movie ever. And I told them straight up, yeah, if you are looking at marketing, marketing is just trying to get you into the theater. It is not the director's intention. Oz Perkins did not do the marketing for that film. It was Neon. Neon did a good job with the marketing, but at the same time, using those clickbaity words of best horror film ever, it is an independent film. An independent film doesn't have necessarily the outlets that big blockbusters do. So they kind of have to use those big words to try to get people into the theater. But it's important for audience members to understand that, and not that, oh my goodness, every single critic is saying it's the scariest film ever. No, it was probably one or two critics that said it was the scariest film ever, and in their viewpoint, and that's totally fine that it's in their viewpoint. But my point is, looking at marketing, looking at trailers, which is a marketing tool, looking at that as the film itself isn't fair to the actual filmmakers behind the projects, as well as the thousands of people that worked on it. You look at the film itself, you look at the historical context as well, but you don't look at the marketing itself unless, hey, the marketing was really good. But if you're saying like, oh yeah, it just didn't live up to the hype, it's like, I mean, the hype is based on what you're making of it. It's not necessarily the film itself. And I think that's really important to say, because you will see, I will say actually, I see all the time, back when I used IMDb religiously, now that I use Letterboxd religiously, I see all the time that people will look at a rating. They will see that a film or a TV show has a 9 out of 10. And they will say, well, I thought it was a 5 out of 10. But you know what? I'm going to give it a 1 out of 10 just to, balance things out. Or certain people say, you know what? People have this really low, but I actually think that it's a 6 out of 10, but I'm not going to give it that. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 to balance things out. And that is also a huge issue. Review bombing is something that I don't think is cool. I think that people should give it what they actually feel like, meaning that you don't just look at things as a this or that. You don't look at things as like a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. There are so many nuances in film as an art form. Look at the filmmaking. Don't look at things as, oh my goodness, it's socially aware. So therefore I'm going to use a clickbaity word such as woke, because woke is not a film criticism. Film criticism is this: the tone was off. It wasn't consistent with what it was trying to go for. The acting felt a little off, which wasn't clearly the intention of the director. The dialogue, it was a little off, but at the same time, I can appreciate that because I can see that the director was clearly going for that. Stuff like that are actual criticism, as opposed to, this movie was woke. Like, what are you trying to do? Just go, like say a word and then expect other people to say, yeah, it was. Because it's like, I have news for you. Woke is a word that used to be positive, and it would have a positive connotation in the Black community. But now, post 2016, it has a negative connotation because it's, oh my goodness, this person or this film or this TV show is socially aware. And I have breaking news for you. Films, here's the dirty little secret. Films have always been political. Films have always had politics. Films have always been socially conscious. You ever seen Citizen Kane? You ever seen Lawrence of Arabia? You ever seen All the President's Men? You ever seen The Parallax View? Godfather 2, these are all films that have those things that you were saying is woke. So if you're going to say films are now all of a sudden woke, I'm sorry, you need a history lesson in film because you are just not educated. And yes, I said educated on purpose because holy cow. But first, to wrap up my previous point, I really do think that people should try not to look at buzzwords, try not to look at marketing. Those are all things that at the end of the day, they are just fluff. Nobody really remembers that stuff. At the end of the day, it's the film itself. Look at the actual filmmaking. Look at the cinematography, the editing, the tone, the atmosphere. Those are things that actually matter. Those are things that last over time. Nobody is going to look at a film from 5 years ago and say, you know what? That movie is woke, so therefore it's not good. Nobody's going to think that because at the end of the day, that is not an actual criticism. It is just an empty word that used to be a positive connotation, but guess what? It was a positive connotation that wasn't towards actual films, TV shows, and other art forms. It was towards the Black community, and now it was weaponized post-2016 in a way that just feels very empty. So as soon as I hear that word in a film review, I don't watch that person's film review because at the end of the day, it is not a film criticism. It is, again, an empty buzzword, and I'm not about that. Like, I easily could have made this video like, are movies still woke? Like, are they woke now? And it's like, but I'm not doing that because I think that that is stupidity on a platter. I'm not about that. The other thing I want to talk about, and this is something that I feel like both sides of the blockbuster and indie spectrum, which yes, there are two. You'll have YouTube film critics that are hardcore into blockbusters. Every movie's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then you'll have the indie film critics where every blockbuster's terrible and indie cinema rocks, art house films, especially the 4-hour ones. You have those two sides. Don't get me wrong, there are people that try to meet in the middle, such as myself, because I do appreciate both. But I think that AI is something that both sides on the spectrum can appreciate as an issue. My thing is with AI is that they are trying to take jobs away from creators, people that do it as a living. Like, if you are using AI in terms of visual effects, if you're going to start using it in terms of editing, you are taking away people's jobs. And that is right now what studios want, because you aren't going to have to pay people. You are just going to have to pay for the software that is able to utilize AI. And I think that's an issue in itself too, because films, I always talk about this with my one friend, Marv, shout out to Marv, but there are a ridiculous amount of blockbusters that are so expensive. And it's like, instead of making them so expensive, utilize some of that money actually towards the VFX artists. Give them actually a long amount of time to create art as opposed to having it where there's these ridiculous deadlines. One of the things that I always say about Black Panther is that I give it some levity in regards to the third act. I know a lot of people criticize the third act for the visual effects, but I remember I watched an episode on Quarter Crew where they actually, the people that worked on the visual effects, mentioned how the reason why the visual effects aren't as strong, and they admitted, was because a lot of the people that were working on that film got pushed from that to then actually working on Avengers Infinity War, which is a film that wasn't coming out until 3 months. So they didn't really believe in Black Panther as much. And because of that, visual effects artists were heavily working overtime. And even then, they were kind of understaffed in that department by the end. So that is something why I give a little bit of slack for that. But the reality is that when you are watching big blockbusters, it is an epidemic. They are overworked and underpaid, and AI is something that is going to try to monopolize on that. And I think that that's something that we are seeing now with the strikes and everything. You are seeing studios that are trying to, instead of give in and actually give them more money, which they so deserve, they are instead saying, you know what, maybe we should hold out and have them either give in or let's start, playing around with AI. You're seeing it now, and that's something that I am scared about. I am genuinely worried about that, combined with the whole theater issue. Taking away theaters, having it where there's a lot of AI based movies where it's like this doesn't feel real. It feels very computerized to the point now where it's like, am I even watching movies? Which leads me also to talk about film versus digital. I will always prefer films that are shot on film, but there are some films that I watch that are shot digitally where I'm like, yeah, that was really well shot, like Blade Runner 2049, Nightmare Alley, films that, yeah, are shot digitally, but they look incredible. But for the most part, there are films that I do watch shot digitally where I'm like, kind of looks murky. And if you're combining the murkiness of digital cinematography combined with AI, you are going to create a very, very fake looking experience that are then going to turn the average viewer even less so towards films and instead towards other stuff. And that's also an issue that I'm having right now. So AI is an issue. Another thing is, I mentioned briefly movie studio monopolization. I want to add on to that even more so. Movie studios used to have it where it was a given that they were competing with one another. But when you had all these different studios, it was a lot of fun with the competition. You would have actors working with either certain studios or they would work with a bunch of different studios. But now you have the monopolization of it where instead of having many different studios, you have it where there is one or two studios that are buying out other studios. And so then because there's only one or two studios that are going to be pretty much left, it is pretty much going to be almost like a dictatorship of the film industry, which will make and suppress independent cinema even more so, which is saddening because independent cinema right now is one of the things that I'm utilizing in terms of my point about how no, films aren't bad right now because we have independent cinema. We have filmmakers that are able to use $1 or $2 million budgets, sometimes even less, to actually make great films. But if you're taking that out of the equation, if you're going to remove independent cinema altogether and just have blockbuster studios that are just using $200 million to tell stories and it's just from two studios' viewpoints, then yeah, there is going to be an issue to be had. It will start to feel very homogenized, and that's something I'm not about. Yeah, it's really saddening. It really is. Now look, I know the video is titled "I Am Worried About the Future of Films," but here's the thing. The reality is, I do think that there is hope for things to turn around and instead of getting worse. Before mentioning those things, I do want to say this. Films have been around for 100 years. They have survived. They survived the Great Depression. They survived the Cold War, World War II. They survived all of that. They are still here. People are still experiencing it. Millions and millions of people are still experiencing it. Millions and millions of people are still experiencing it for the first time, like it as an art form, it as a film that like can transport you into another world, and it's great. But again, there are some issues to be had. But I think that if you change certain things about your habits, I do genuinely believe that it will be for the better. So some of those things are, one, it is up to the viewers. At the end of the day, it is up to you. It is not up to the studio because the studio looks at viewers. They look at viewers' habits. If you are stopped going to the theater, if you are someone that has stopped watching movies that aren't IP based, like if you're watching just IP based movies, studios notice that. That's why when people say, everything's a sequel, everything's a prequel, it's because they are looking at the numbers. They are looking at that people are going to see these movies at the theater as opposed to these mid-budget movies that are original. So that is a thing that, again, money speaks first. So support indie cinema. Support movies that are lower budget. There was a time in 2014, 2015, where a couple of my friends, I would say, look, let's see this movie at this time. They would say, what's it about? Oh, I don't know. I just know the runtime and this is who it stars. Okay. And they would watch it with me and they would love it. A film like Whiplash, a film like Nightcrawler. They would experience it. And these are films that weren't heavily advertised. They were just experienced by someone that was like, hey, let me just give this movie a chance. If you have those tendencies of just wanting to actually give a film a chance that you might not necessarily know about because it wasn't heavily marketed, because it might not necessarily have the studio push or budget, give those movies a chance. You will be surprised at how many films of those are great. And also, cut some of them slack, though, if they do have advertising and they are being advertised as the best action film of all time or the best horror film of all time. The reason why they have those is because one or two people actually believes that and are putting it into the marketing, so that way you as viewers will say, you know what, I'm actually going to give this film a chance. Because I guarantee you, a film like Longlegs, if it wasn't marketed the way that it was with being the best horror film of all time, many of you will probably not have seen it. That's just the reality of it. So change the habits. Actually give a film a chance. Don't believe into hype. Don't look into actual, clickbaity words. Don't look into all that. Actually look at film criticism. Take a film class. I've taken several film classes. It is very nourishing. Just learn about it as an art form. There are other things too, such as support the creators. Look at the creators. At the end credits, look at who directed the movie, who wrote the movie. Oh, wow. Now I want to check out some of that director's other work or that writer's other work. Oh, wow. This person, this composer, I liked their score. Let me check out some of their other scores. Stuff like that will help the people. You don't want AI to be in movies? Great. I agree with that. Support the people. Actually look at the people as opposed to the studio when you're trying to support something. So, again, those are some of the things that I think. Oh, also, I know that this is a drop in the bucket, but also go to your local library. Not only are you supporting the community by actually getting out movies for free, but you are also helping yourself by saying like, hey, I'm going to watch these movies now. You're not going to be overwhelmed after work. You're not going to be stressed. It will be nice. But yeah, support your local library. Support physical media. There's certain movies that if you pick up on physical media, you'll have the best quality possible. So again, these are some of the things I personally think will help. But at the end of the day, I know my channel is limited. I know that I am not someone like, Stuckman or Jeremy Jen or, one of those creators. I'm not. I'm just putting my voice out there so that way at the end of the day, I can look back at this video and say, was I right? Was I wrong? Was I in the middle about some things? Was I on the right track? Was I off track? I think that I did take a lot from history in regards to some of these points. But at the end of the day, only time will tell in regards to these points. If AI will take over, if people will stop shooting on film completely, and that it will just be digitally. Will CGI be overly heavy? Will independent cinema be pretty much obsolete as well? Who knows? Nobody knows at this point. But these are the things that got me saying I'm worried about the state of films. But guys, at the end of the day, I love films. I didn't mention TV shows because I think that TV shows are kind of at the high right now. You have everyone experiencing shows like Succession, The Bear, House of the Dragon, shows that if they were in theaters probably wouldn't do well. So I'm not mentioning theaters in the same breath because I think TV shows, my apologies, are doing well right now. So right now, that's why I'm talking about films. So I'm curious though, what are your thoughts on the state of the film industry? Let me know in the comment section down below. Keep it respectful because at the end of the day, I have my own opinions. You have your own opinions. That's what's great about just life in general. It is subjective. So I'm curious to see your thoughts. Also, if you're new to the channel, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me on Letterboxd, and I will catch you guys later.